How often does this happen to you? A theist will say, well, I've got tons of evidence for their imaginary friend, yet what they present is nothing remotely resembling evidence in any way, shape, or form. In fact, they don't seem to even know what any of those words mean. Why is this so absurdly common? Let's take a look at it. Coming up next. Today, we're going to look at some claims of evidence for the existence of God. It comes from a website called christinscripture.com, but sadly, at least for the religious, nothing that they present remotely qualifies as evidence. Mostly, this is because they have no idea what the hell evidence is, how it's used, or what it's supposed to do. And I'm going to try to address some of that, even though I think we all know that the religious just won't care. They just want to believe. They just want their imaginary friends to be real. The fact that they can't show that any of it is reasonable, rational, or verifiably true, that doesn't seem to matter, does it? So, let's get started. We see the religious claiming that they have evidence all the time, but none of it ever is. However, it's not often that we stop and explain exactly why it isn't evidence for their claims. And I wanted to go ahead and do that today for an article that comes from christinscripture.com, because while a lot of things that we see going on are pretty commonplace, none of it is actual evidence for the claim that they are trying to make. So let's get at it. Is there any evidence for the existence of God? If so, how can we find it? These questions, if asked and pursued sincerely, can lead one into a great body of knowledge and truth. But if asked just to challenge and debate, one might gain little more than an argument. I maintain there is strong evidence for God's existence from logical, scientific, and historical perspectives. If you are a skeptic or agnostic, my hope is that this article will persuade you. And that all depends on what it is that you have to say. So let's look at a definition of evidence and see if it's actually going to match up. This is one we've used many times before. Evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So what is a fact? A fact is a thing that is known or proved to be true. We can go down the rabbit hole forever on this, but I think that's enough to get us somewhere useful. A fact is not something that you believe. A fact is something that you can demonstrate. A fact is not up for interpretation. It is verifiable. Therefore, evidence are facts which can be shown to lead directly to a particular conclusion. The facts are what gets you there, not based on what you really want to be true, but on what is demonstrably true, what is defensibly true. So let's continue. Some people ask for proof of God's existence, but when there is a lack of proof, they claim this shows that God doesn't exist. But proof is physical evidence that it is undeniable and irrefutable. There is no, nor can there be, physical proof of God's existence, since he transcends the physical world. So proof is not the goal of any inquiry into the existence of God. Well, for some people, they do use evidence and proof pretty interchangeably, and granted, they aren't necessarily the same thing, but for the sake of argument, let's say they're pretty close. What we see a lot of times from the religious are just claims that God is real, without any kind of independent, verifiable evidence to back it up. It's that independent, verifiable evidence that we need, and the religious, whether they like it or not, whether they're willing to admit it or not, they simply don't have any. Granted, whoever wrote this, and there's no name attached to it that I can find, they say that there is evidence. So we'll evaluate that when we get there. But the one thing you simply cannot do is just state a priori that God is real without supporting it with any kind of verifiable evidence first. So let's check the rest of this section and then move on. To approach the subject, we need to look at evidences. And that's not a word, sorry, and not demanded proof. Science is unbiased inquiry into something that is unknown, but science deals only with the material world, and the scientific method can prove only something that is observable, measurable, and repeatable. Therefore, many, if not most, theological beliefs cannot be addressed through science. But science does have a place in the discussion about God, because there are many evidences in the physical universe for the existence of an intelligent creator, from a micro to a macro scale. All of the examples in this article are such evidences of God's existence. And here is where they really start to go wrong. Science deals with the detectable. If science can find it, then science can evaluate it. At present, science can only find natural things which have left behind evidence for their own existence. Anyone who claims that there is something beyond the detectable, then they have the burden of proof to show how they have come to that conclusion rationally. In other words, they have to provide evidence that their claims are, in fact, valid and demonstrably true. And this is where the religious start to have issues, because, at least so far as I've ever seen, they can provide no evidence of any kind that anything beyond the natural world exists. Just because you want it to be true, that doesn't make it true. They claim that it is, but claiming things doesn't make them real. You would need to show how you have come to that conclusion intellectually, not by faith, not because you believe it, intellectually, rationally, by evidence. Just believing it or having faith in it, just because it says so in a book that you really like, that doesn't mean anything. You have to do better, and at least as far as I've ever seen, none of the religious have gotten anywhere close. Throughout history, humans have believed in different concepts of God and portrayed their gods using human images and characteristics, or images from the physical world, such as carved statues. Yes, but simply because a lot of people have believed it, that doesn't make it so. The problem with the religious is that they start with the unwarranted assumption that gods, their gods, not all gods of course, just their gods, are real. Just because you really like the idea of gods, that doesn't make gods real, especially when you're talking to people who don't share your base preconceptions. The religious often handle that in different ways, but often by simply asserting that everybody else really believes that their gods are real, the opposition just wants to sin. And that's not an argument. That is basically admitting rational defeat. So let's keep going on with this section. But when Christians say God, we mean the uncreated creator of all spiritual and physical things, forces, realms, and worlds. The components of the physical realm are finite and measurable. If God is creator, then he is outside of the physical world and can't be observed, measured, or subject to physical investigation. If God were a part of the physical world in any way, then he would not be the creator. Therefore, any concept of a creator God as being part of what was created is faulty. Without this understanding, we can't discuss God intelligently. That's why Christians say that God is transcendent, existing beyond the physical realm. It also means he exists beyond time, since time and space are inseparable. But if God created the physical world, then we would expect this world to reflect his attributes in some way. We would be able to learn what he is like by observing what he created. If, not because, if. This is again where the religious just go wrong. They are assuming that they are right because they want to be right. They're not demonstrating it. They're not providing evidence. They're just assuming. That doesn't mean anything. A proposition becomes correct if and only if it has evidence presented that shows that it is actually true. You can't start off by saying, well, we believe God did this, therefore looking at this will tell us about God. You haven't established God in the first place. You haven't established that this God thing of yours did anything. Your beliefs don't matter. And this is why it's so important to stop them at this point and not let them take one step further. Prove your God. Don't tell me what you believe about your God. Produce demonstrable, verifiable evidence for your God's existence. Faith goes right out the window because faith means nothing. Every religion has faith, but that doesn't mean that all religions are real. Christians wouldn't let that fly from any other religion. Therefore, we cannot let it fly from them. You have to produce evidence for your God, independent of what you might believe about it. What you believe doesn't matter. What you can provide evidence for does. About 57 AD, the Apostle Paul wrote that there are abundant evidences for God's existence. I don't care. This is just my book says a thing. If a Muslim came up to them and said the Quran said that Muhammad ripped the moon in half, would they accept that as factually true just because their book said a thing? Of course not, which means they don't get to use their book as evidence unless they can show that it is factually correct first. And that hasn't happened. It isn't evidence, it's just a claim. You can't get from, I really want it to be true, to, this is a demonstrable fact backed up with verifiable evidence. Until you can, your book means nothing. Paul reasoned that although God himself is invisible to the physical world, his qualities are seen in the things that he has made. His logic was that the Creator must be at least as powerful, magnificent, and complex as the universe he created, but more so. And these attributes are visible to all who live in this world. He could see the stars, the vastness of space, and the immense power displayed in the cosmos. So he knew the Creator must be infinite, eternal, and immensely powerful or omnipotent. And he could see nature with its beauty and complex biological life, including intelligent beings living on the earth. So God must be exceedingly intelligent. Now, none of that's actually true. Paul imagined those things because Paul liked the idea. Just because you like Paul, that doesn't mean that Paul was right. Any more than just because Muslims like Muhammad, that doesn't mean that everything in the Quran happened as described. There are no double standards, and religion absolutely relies on them. Therefore, from here on out, if our Christian ever says something that they would not also accept from a Muslim, using the Quran as support, then it just isn't evidence. Sorry, it's just a claim. Claims mean nothing. We're trying to get to the facts here, and your fifis just don't matter. There are no double standards. That is not how any of this works. The principle of cause and effect says that whatever has a beginning has a cause. There is now abundant scientific evidence that the universe had a beginning, a huge explosive release of energy, popularly called the Big Bang. This requires a first cause, which we term God. Without God, we would have to believe that nothing produced everything that exists. Look, I don't care if you term it Mickey Mouse. That is not how reality works. We have cause and effect, but you have not shown that the cause of the universe, and we'll leave it at that for the moment, was any God, much less yours. You don't just get to slap a label on it and say, see, I was right all along, because other religions would disagree. Now, it's sadly obvious that the religious do not understand the Big Bang. It wasn't an explosion out of nothing. It was an expansion of pre-existing material out of a state of intense gravity and heat. It wasn't what they are asserting, therefore all their claims about it are just factually incorrect. And we all know they don't care. I mean, we don't even have to get to their God claims because their basic comprehension of reality is completely out of whack. This is why claims and faith are insufficient. You need to show a direct causal link. Where is thing X, which you can show with evidence, directly caused event Y? How do you get there? And more importantly, how do you prove it? Because again, we don't care about your say-so. We don't care about your faith. We are trying to get to the truth, and the truth must be demonstrable. So where is your demonstration? Produce it for us. We'll wait. But there must have been control behind this event. Why wasn't the beginning of the universe just a totally uncontrolled release of energy? How did there come to be uniformity, order, complexity, function, beauty, and intelligence in the cosmos from an explosion of raw energy? Some mechanism must have controlled this cataclysmic event to result in the present form of matter and the universe as we see it now. Without it, a totally chaotic universe might have occurred. That mechanism of control was God. Says who? Because this is exactly why they don't have evidence. This is not evidence. These are just claims. Claims mean absolutely nothing without direct and demonstrable corroboration. This is exactly why faith means nothing. A Muslim would say that the mechanism of control was Allah. A Hindu would say something else. Just because you say it, that doesn't make it so. This is the core of the failure of religious arguments. Their entire position can be summed up with, well, I don't get it, therefore God. You can fill in any God in there too, since none of them have any evidence that their own preferred version is real. Yet again, if they won't accept another religion's identical answer made for the exact same reason, then we have no reason at all to accept theirs. It's just something that they really want to be true. We don't care about their desires, though. We care about the demonstrable facts. We care about the testable facts. And they just don't have any of those, do they? So now I guess we're getting into some of the evidences. I don't know. Let's go. God's existence shown in the physical universe. Part whatever, physical constraints. The physical universe is defined by inviolable laws commonly called the laws of nature. When these laws are expressed as equations, constants appear whose values are unchangeable. There are many of these physical constants, including the force of gravity, the speed of light, the mass of atomic particles, and the forces holding them together. These laws are universal and unchanging, as they have well-defined and demonstrated mathematical relationships in the real world. They define and govern the universe we live in, and their existence strongly suggests a transcendent lawgiver. Without established physical properties and laws, there would be no physical universe at all. Yeah, not really. No. There are physical laws to be sure, but those are based on our observations, and our observations can be wrong. The ones that we have today are just the things that we have not yet found anything that violates them. It's not that they can't be violated, because we do find exceptions to the rules all the time. And when we do, we alter the rules because we were simply mistaken. Their understanding of this isn't particularly good, therefore, what else can you expect? Saying, well, this is the speed of light in a vacuum. I mean, that's great and all. Unless you've got a black hole, then all bets are off. You've got basic causality, which sounds great, until you get to the quantum realm, where it doesn't seem to apply. The more that we learn about the universe, the less likely it is that the laws that we've made up to explain how everything works, the less likely any of that is to survive unchallenged. The whole concept of a lawgiver is therefore ludicrous. Things are consistent and explainable until they're not. Complexity, uniformity, and order are observed in nature. They exist in every part of the universe, from a subatomic to a galactic scale, and demonstrate an intelligent design. Order on a large scale can be seen in the movement of the planets around the Sun and the stars within the galaxies, in response to the physical constant of gravity. On the small scale, we see order as well as uniformity in subatomic particles, atoms, and mineral crystals. Yeah, but the thing is, you don't know. You can't say that these laws exist in every single corner of the universe, as we haven't been to every single corner of the universe to verify the claim. We know only what we know, and then only when we know it. We could find out that, I don't know, a million light years away from home, shit doesn't work like that anymore. A lot of what we think we see out there is based on assumptions that we cannot at present verify are true. Now, that terrifies a lot of people, and I guess understandably so, but it doesn't actually change anything. We have no reason to think that things are different out there somewhere, but that doesn't mean that we've confirmed that they aren't. And this brings us to one of the basic tenets of skepticism. We only know what we actually know, and we can only believe things based on our current understanding. The only constant thing that we have is change. Tomorrow, everything that we think we know could be overturned by new data. Welcome to the real world. Too bad a lot of people are terrified to live in it. Subatomic uniformity. There are many types of particles present in the universe. Protons, neutrons, electrons, and photons are the most visible to us. There are trillions upon trillions of particles, but each type of particle is incredibly uniform in size, energy, and behavior. This uniformity demonstrates a design which requires a designer. There are 3 types of uniformity that he brought up, and I'm going to skim through these before we wind up for the day. Ultimately, what I already said holds true for all of them. We know what we know right this second, and that says absolutely nothing about what we could know tomorrow. Yet the religious, in making these arguments, they are relying on knowledge being eternal. Everything has to hold true forever because that's what makes them comforted. They want it to be true, even though we have numerous examples throughout history of man's best efforts being completely wrong. Disease is not caused by demons. Rats do not magically appear out of grain. We had no clue about DNA until we did. We didn't understand how to harness the atomic structure until we figured it out. Knowledge constantly marches on. Therefore, all of the gobbledygook that this guy is spouting is just nonsense. It relies on things that we know for a fact are just not true. Atomic uniformity. Atomic uniformity and order are everywhere present in the universe. The neutrons, protons, and electrons within each atom all behave according to the physical laws, giving rise to individual elements. There are many types of elements: hydrogen, nitrogen, iron, uranium, each uniform in size, mass, and energy, being governed by the physical laws. The size of each type of atom and its nucleus and the energy levels within them are completely uniform, ensuring that they behave consistently in chemical reactions. Okay, so what? Because here's the thing that we notice about a lot of these claims by the religious. They will say something like that, which is generally correct, and then they'll tack "therefore God" on the end, because they can't understand how this works without their imaginary friend. Now, we don't know a lot about the universe. We think we do, but a lot of that is just extrapolation based on what we know from local space. Like I said, somewhere out there, things might do a complete 180. We just don't know. We are just extrapolating based on our current best ideas. So far as we can tell at present, everything works uniformly, but that doesn't mean that there's a God, just because that would make some people really, really happy to think that there was. Your wishes and your dreams don't matter. You don't get to leap from, "well, I don't get it," to "therefore there's a designer," to "that designer is a God," to "that God is my God." There's a whole lot of steps in the middle of all of those that have to be filled in, showing how you get from one proposition to the next with evidence. And it's sad they can't provide any of that evidence, isn't it? Crystalline order. Mineral crystals are a perfect example of order. The crystal structure of each mineral is based on an orderly arrangement of specific atoms in a lattice structure. This arrangement is reproduced in 3 dimensions billions upon billions of times in each crystal. Light passing through crystals behaves exactly the same for each mineral type, revealing a common internal structure. Variations or impurities in the lattice structure give rise to the interplay of colors and incredible beauty. All of this points to an intelligent designer. But it does absolutely nothing of the sort. As with most things, it is just nature doing what nature does. This becomes a giant argument from personal incredulity. They don't understand it, mostly because they don't want to. Therefore, they simply declare their emotionally comforting beliefs true because, well, of course they are. A Christian is going to think one thing, a Hindu is going to think something else. All of them have just ripped their wishes and dreams out of their backsides because that's what they want to be true. However, wanting something to be true, that doesn't make it true. Anytime you hear a theist say, well, I don't get it, therefore God, which is all this entire article is, that's when you know that these people are idiots. These people have not thought about any of it at all, because none of them actually care. Ultimately, that's all religion is. It's just people really wanting things to be so without the capacity to show that those things are actually so. There has been no evidence presented here whatsoever because evidence isn't, well, it just sounds good to me. It's, here's how we can demonstrate a direct causal link between a demonstrable cause and a demonstrable effect. The religious don't even try to do that. They don't care. They just really want to believe. But really wanting to believe doesn't mean anything. Wanting to believe is childish and entirely unrealistic, which is exactly what religion leads to. However, that's where we're going to stop for the day. Honestly, I looked at this and thought, oh, this will be a nice short video, and yeah, that's not how it worked out, is it? I will get through this in 2, maybe 3, but as I'm delving into these theist websites and videos more and more, it's becoming painfully obvious that there is a lot more to say to debunk the crap that the faithful believe. It's just impossible to get that through their heads because they are so fanatically invested in their being a god that they are incapable of looking beyond their own wishful thinking. And that's sad, isn't it? Anyway, let me know what you think of this part, at least the stuff that we've covered so far, down in the comment section below. What do you say when the religious say they've got evidence? Do they ever present any? I mean, legitimately. Are they open to having their failures explained? Let me know what you think down below, and I'll catch you all again next time.